Well, hello there, I'm Papa John and welcome to my channel, and we are continuing with our 25 slashing Santas of Christmas. And if you want to see more slashing Santas in the next couple of weeks, make sure to hit that subscribe button, the notification bell as well, hit the thumbs up if you enjoy this video, and comment on your favorite Santa slashers down below. And today, we're going to get into 5 modern evil Santas. All of these are going to be from the 2010s, so they're not the newest movies, but they are modern era movies. So let's get into it. Well, who was the original evil Santa in folklore? It was probably Krampus. And that's where we will be starting off today, looking at 2015's Krampus. This is probably the only movie on this list, until I check out the new one this weekend, that I will have seen in theaters. And when I saw it in theaters, I loved it. I was in high school and I adored this movie when I saw it in theaters on the big screen. Finally seeing an evil Santa Claus on the big screen. And I'm a big Adam Scott fan. I've grown to love Toni Collette since. I didn't know who she was back then. And just the entire cast here is great, and they play off each other very well. And I love how this movie is kind of like a twisted version of National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, where you have all of the family members bickering, you have different sides of the family members, none of them really get along, and you have very relatable family members, but you get more of a caricature version of them. And then it kind of turns into this wacky horror comedy that I just really eat up and enjoy. So what happens here? You have your main kid character who wants to believe in Christmas and wants Santa to essentially fix his family for Christmas. He wants people to get along again like they used to. But then that seems to be impossible, and he kind of throws a fit. He rips up his letter to Santa Claus and stops believing in Christmas and stops having faith in Santa. And that draws the attention of Krampus, who comes to town to wreak havoc on the neighborhood as well as his family. Now, this movie has some great practical work, especially when it comes to 2010s horror, where a lot of stuff was CGI. And don't get me wrong, there is CGI in here. Obviously, the gingerbread men are CGI in this movie, but you get a lot of great practical work with a lot of the malfunctioning toys and just the look of Krampus, which certainly has some CGI in it as well. But I just think this movie looks amazing, and you just get a great, very traditional holiday feel. You know, that family camaraderie. It has just that nice holiday theme. This is one of my Christmas favorites. I adore this movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies, honestly, from the 2010s probably. You know, it might not be in my top 10 of the decade, but it's up there for me. I truly, truly love this movie. And I think just in terms of being a Christmas horror movie, it might be the best ever made. Not necessarily in individual quality, because I don't think it's quite as good of a film as something like Black Christmas. But in terms of capturing the spirit of the holiday and doing that in a horror setting, I don't think any movie does it as good as Krampus. And staying on the topic of Krampus, from 2015, we also have A Christmas Horror Story. Now, this is usually listed as an anthology, and it kind of is an anthology, but it's a different type of anthology in the sense that you have, I think 4 separate stories going on that aren't necessarily connected, except for the fact that they're pretty much all in the same town. That being said, they're not told where you have one segment that transitions into a next one. They're told simultaneously. So it's sort of like an anthology, but the stories are told simultaneously. And one of the stories deals with Krampus being let loose. And it's a really decent enough story, and that specific story does take some twists and turns. But there's also another story that has to do with a killer Santa that also Krampus plays into it as well towards the very end, where it looks like you're going to get this meeting between Santa and Krampus, this epic battle. But then there's a little twist that happens that may or may not have to do with 25 slashing Santas of Christmas. And I really love the badass Santa they have in this movie. And I like the little twist they give at the end, where you think all of this is happening in the North Pole, but that may or may not actually be the case. This is a movie that I discovered, I believe, on Netflix back in 2015 as well. I watched this after seeing Krampus, I believe, and just wanted more companion movies to go with it, and I've loved this movie since. Is it the same quality? No. It's a direct-to-video movie. It's not going to have the same budget and quality of actors as Krampus will. A Christmas Horror Story, I think, is a real true hidden gem. I think people who love Christmas and love horror should definitely check it out. The other stories are pretty good as well. The one that takes place in like the basement of a school, that one is very memorable, where you have a couple sort of ghost hunting high schoolers in the high school's basement and boiler rooms. And then you also have the sort of fourth story where you have that deals with a changeling and going out into the woods to grab a Christmas tree from a restricted area. Overall, I do highly recommend A Christmas Story. Is it going to be 5 out of 5 stars? No. But I still think it's definitely a recommendation for Christmas fans and horror fans alike. And next we have a movie that I'm not going to recommend to everybody, but I do recommend it to people like me. And that is 2015's All Through the House. I am not going to tell you this is a good movie. The acting is bad. The dialogue is bad. The story can kind of get nonsensical in the third act, but that's why I want to recommend this movie to just people out there who love B-movie, just B-movies that go for it. And this goes for it. But one other thing I want to recommend to people and why I wanted to include this entry is because even though the acting is terrible, you can tell it's very low budget. But the budget they did have went towards the gore effects, and you do get some pretty surprisingly well done kills. You don't really have much Spirit Halloween type of gore here. It's pretty well done gore. It's not going to be Terrifier levels or anything like that. These aren't Greg Nicotero or Damien Leone doing the gore effects. But given the quality of the acting and how cheap everything else looks, the gore is surprisingly well done. And the kills are surprisingly good. So if you can get past the acting and you just want to have a fun T&K, tits and kills type of slasher, you're going to have a blast with this one. The first 2 acts, it's just kind of like a generic slasher. The Santa Claus going around killing people with some really bad, like, young women actors that are nice to look at. I won't say they aren't. They are pretty nice to look at. I'll give them that. But the actual performances are less than desirable. But after those first 2 acts of just generic slasher schlock, you get to the third act, and this thing just goes for it. And the story just goes off the rails. And the best way to describe it is just, imagine if you threw Sleepaway Camp, Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, The Burning, Psycho, Friday the 13th Parts 1 and 2, Halloween, and Silent Night, Deadly Night. You took all of those classic 80s slashers, you threw them all into a blender and blended it, and this third act especially, this movie in general, but the third act especially, is just gonna be that. It really just dives into a rabbit hole that you just never really come out of. And the craziness of that is why I had a blast watching this. Is this a good movie? No. But if you can get past the terrible acting in the first 2 acts to make it to just a bonkers third act, you'll have a blast watching it. And next, we're going to 2017 with a little film called Once Upon a Time at Christmas. This is a movie that when I was trying to compile a list of 25 films, I wasn't on my radar at all. But I saw a trailer for it, and it caught my attention. So essentially, you have basically this Harley Quinn character and the Santa Claus that basically acts like the Joker, wreaking havoc and going on a murder spree, all centered around the 12 Days of Christmas song. And that, I thought, was a great concept and a great idea that they did really well for the first 15 minutes, and they did really well for the last 15 minutes. That being said, everything in the middle sucked ass. And normally I wouldn't include this. I'd try to find something maybe hopefully a little better to include and recommend to you guys. But I did want to highlight this movie because first, I do think Simon Phillips does a great performance as Santa Claus, but he doesn't really get a lot of screen time until that third act and that last 20 minutes or so. And he does a really great job. I can't say the same for anybody else in the movie, though. And it starts off really well with a couple decent kills, but then after that, most of the kills, it gets into like a lot of CGI blood, which is not necessarily a great thing, but the budget was very low, as you can tell watching this. And because of that, they also weren't able to get great world-class actors either. And that's sort of my issue with this movie, is I wanted to highlight this movie because I want the story to be highlighted. Because I think it's a really, really good story. And I think the concept that the director had and the idea was really, really good. And I want someone to discover this film, and hopefully one day that someone has the resources to take this idea and create this amazing holiday-themed 7 out of it. As it is right now, I sadly have to say it's a bad movie, and one of the worst ones that I'm going to talk about this year. However, I do think the idea and concept is amazing, and I really, really want to see a full-scaled version of this. It's just this is not that. And the last movie we're going to talk about today is from 2019, and that is an anthology film called Deathcember. Now, this is not a full Killer Santa movie, but the last segment is definitely a Killer Santa segment and story. It's not one of the best. It's not the best. It's one of the worst Killer Santas we've seen yet. But there are some good little stories and shorts and segments leading up to that. Essentially what you have here is an anthology built around the idea of an advent calendar, where you have sort of a short that kind of represents each day. And one of the things that caught my attention is about halfway through, I believe it's like day 14 or day 15. The short on that day is directed by Ruggero Deodato, the guy who directed Cannibal Holocaust. And I thought that was a lot of fun, and his short is a lot of fun. It's one of the more memorable ones. I don't necessarily think it's the best, but it's one of the more memorable ones. And you get some decent shorts in there. I do think the best one is the one that's after the credits, where you have a stripper in a Santa costume that turns out to be a vampire. So that one's a lot of fun. But you have to sit not just through all 24 shorts, but you have to sit through all of the credits for all of the 24 shorts. And another secret mid-credits short, just to get to the best short at the very end of the credits. So this is a long movie to get through, but because they're shorts and anthologies, you can easily just pause it and come back to it later without ruining any experience here. It's a slog to get through because most of the shorts aren't the best. But there is some good, cheesy holiday fun you can have if you're just smoking a joint with your friends and you have some munchies available. You can have a lot of fun with Deathcember. So those are 5 modern Evil Santa movies for you to check out this holiday season. And if you want more Killer Santa movies, go ahead and check out the 2 videos I've already made. Hit that subscribe button so you can hear about more in the next couple of weeks. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Comment your thoughts on these 5 movies down below if you want, and just your thoughts on Killer Santa movies in general. And have a happy holidays and a Merry motherfucking Christmas, y'all.
Fuck you! I'll break that fucking stuff in your rosy cheeked ass, you fucker!
I'm sorry, Shiny.